I think a goal for Commit is really to engage our community and get folks to show what they've been working on, what they're excited about. And so we've got two folks who are eager to raise their hands, which I'm always excited to see. Sarah and Lilith, who will be going through their projects today. So Sarah, you're closest on my screen, so I'm going to pass it over to you to share the screen and explain a little bit more about what you're going to be demoing to us.
All right. So yeah, I can start. Basically what I'm demoing is, if you've worked in a code base that has React on the front end, you may or may not have already seen a product called Storybook. Nod if you have. But if you've also worked in a larger team where you've got Figma for designs, you've got Storybook, and you've got React, you probably still have this whole thing of make it look like Figma, make this look like this. Or well,
that's true.
However it would be. Yes. So what I am demoing today is basically the ecosystem and how these three products can relate, or these two products can relate to each other through actually a third product also made by Storybook called Chromatic. So what I've done is I've actually rebuilt a tutorial app that a friend of mine was struggling with about 15 months ago. And long story short, it was an old tutorial from like 2018. It was supposed to be kind of an Instagram clone with Google Firebase, made with Google Firebase. Firebase had gone through major upgrades, so I rewrote the tutorial app for him so he could focus on just the React components at the time. But I've taken that and I've added some permissions to write to the database. I've added some authentication, and I said, as I was kind of going through some interview processes and talking about this Storybook, React, Figma, Chromatic, interplay, I said, well, why don't I just kind of set up this ecosystem using this project app that I've been playing around with anyway. So that is what I've done, and I can share my screen and show it to you. So if we look at, let's just go with the host. I'm not getting the option for a desktop one, so I might actually shift hold multiple windows. So I'll give you everything that I have open here. All right, first starting with source tree, which has nothing in it at the moment. But if we go over to, I've got localhost up and running for Firegram, which was the Firebase Instagram clone. So some minimal functionality here, basically just click a button, upload pictures. So right now I'm just taking some of my favorites from Unsplash and something like that. I think that's reasonably different. And we are typically seeing, we've got, one happened a little earlier. So if I'm going to do a hard refresh. I got logged out. Okay, so log into, because I had to change my database permission. So my Cloud Firestore database was not wide open. So I said, okay, let's put in some authentication. So I have a user account using my regular email. So we log in, and from here, we can go and grab a photo, take that other one. And we see we have a progress bar that comes along. And then as soon as it passes the checks on Firebase or on Cloud Firestore, we get a success message that pops up. You can dismiss it. Excuse me, that takes out the progress bar as well. So yeah, and then we've got images that we can take a look at. This part was original tutorial functionality, but this is kind of the crux of the app. So you can sign out, you can sign in, you can get an error message if you're trying to sign in with the wrong password, for example. You can register for a new account. Here's a new account test. Do our random 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 password. And that would register. But if I changed something with the password, I would get an error. Basically, could not register new user, passwords do not match. And this would be our error message. And actually, I'm in the process of getting, one of the things that we did here is I did an audit of the colors for text, and I accidentally created some regression that Chromatic caught. This is supposed to be red text here that says could not register new user. It's supposed to match the border here. So I will show you how to use Chromatic to catch these types of things and also have some control over open PRs and everything in the following tabs here. See, I've got reviewing build 16 up here, and then reverting the error text color up here. So yeah, so jumping back into this, that's the basic functionality of the app itself. Kind of give it to you as an overview in a nutshell. And then of course I have all of these components: the upload button, the login, modal, the whole title, top of the page here, Firegram, icon, your pictures, upload all your mesmerizing photos, etc. All of that is in one component. And from here, I've got the screen built in Figma. So we're seeing something very similar to what we've got. And also, just one moment here, we've got also our other components with stories built out. And this would be, for example, the progress bar and the success message that you just saw. And then if you're actually not logged in, you would get an error message. And then this login register, when I'm logged in, it says welcome. Otherwise, login register is there. And we've got our modals ourselves in Figma. So login error, and then we've got register and register error right here. So these are all the things you're seeing in play in the app. And if we go into Storybook, then we've got the same thing showing up in Storybook. So this is great. So we've got our title, that top third of the page in Storybook is here. And there's a logged out state and a logged in state. So these are considered individual stories. So the logged out state is what we're looking at here, login register. And also when I go and I've also got interactions built in. So we do some interactions with the component to make sure that it is working as it should. So this is jest based. So expect, getting matchers and equivalencies just the same way you would do in your jest snapshots. So if I hit logged in, it's done a quick login behind the scenes and says, welcome, Sarah. And also if we go into, I have to be a little careful because this is actually updating authentication on Firebase as well. So this is live. If I go into auth modal, it will bring up our login and say, great, Sarah logged in, all of our tests pass. And this login modal also looks like it should look on Figma. So this is one of the cool ways to integrate Storybook and Figma. So we've got a one-way connection right here that is saying, all right, let's link our Storybook to a component on the Figma canvas, on this absolutely huge canvas that I've got here. If I scroll out, it's quite a bit larger. And you can actually say copy a link to, actually, let me move this over a little more. Copy a link there and embed that in Storybook. So that's one way to get Storybook and Figma to talk, to really say, okay, am I getting my design to look exactly like getting my component to look exactly like the design looks? So that's a quick way to do a Figma to Storybook link. But what we actually have is something more powerful as well. So think of that as a one-way link in one direction. And we also have another possibility to link Storybook to Figma. So with that, it's actually a live hosted platform called Chromatic. And Chromatic, basically right now, if I'm looking at Figma, this is web hosted, obviously. If I'm looking at my Storybook, we're on localhost 6006. So with that, I mean, how are these two things going to talk to each other? So Chromatic actually live hosts your Storybook anytime that you can set it up to anytime that you push to your origin. It will build a fresh Storybook on Chromatic, and then you can check for any differences in code, in styles, like the error one, and go from there. And you can also build it into your CI/CD. So, for example, I've caught that error text that was showing up if I do something silly here and just make it an email address. do not save it in 1Password, obviously, but yeah. So this error text that really should be read, we actually caught it in, or I actually caught that. That was something I introduced without realizing it in build 16. So last time I pushed to the origin on GitHub, I'd made this change and Chromatic caught it and said, hey, you know, you've had a change in this error message that's coming up. You know, it was on the, from, you know, a previous build, it's showing up red and now it's showing up black or very dark gray. So we don't like that. Or so what I said there was, okay, I'm going to deny the change because I do not like that. So that's fine. And what I did was I made a second branch and put in a PR for changing that. I could have done that obviously just as a next commit, but with this, I ended up just saying, all right, let's go through a developer workflow. Say I assigned that as a task for somebody to fix. Here's, they made the change, they fixed it. Here's the PR. So we've got this actually built into our CI/CD flow. So we deploy our storybook to Chromatic, deploy to Firebase hosting on PR. That's for Firebase, so that's not related to Storybook at all. Chromatic deployment preview on push, that worked. Published the storybook. It went through those interaction tests and said, okay, 24 stories published, 24 tests unchanged. So these are all happy. And the only one that's outstanding is UI review. So UI review is basically going in and catching or looking at these two things side by side and saying, all right, if there's a difference here, is this a difference that we want, or is this something that could be potentially introducing some regression? So we go in here and look at the changes, and we're seeing changes going in the opposite direction. So we're going from dark gray text to red, and this is what we want. So that is great. And what they do also is you can overlay the differential. So this kind of gives a weird greenish cast. So if I take that off, you see that, you know, we are actually achieving what we want. And then, yeah, just say review now. And I can go in, I can write a comment anywhere on them as well. So I can say, looks great. And that'll be saved. And even here, I can just say review now, approve PR yourself. So it says, okay, great, you approved the UI changes in this PR, can go in and actually merge pull request. So there we go. And that will build another copy of Storybook and on Chromatic, and then it will update everything there. So we've caught a change, or we caught an unexpected change. We were able to see it on the snapshots. We were able to fix it, and then this is the PR for fixing it. So that will deploy another, another deploy to Firebase, and also another deploy of a fresh Storybook to Chromatic. So that's kind of the developer workflow. It really it really gets to be fairly simple to use overall. And if we look at Figma again, and want to take a look down here, we do have something called Storybook Connect. So we've got a plugin here that allows us to connect to Figma, or sorry, to connect to Storybook. So easiest way to do this is very similar to how we did it on connecting Figma to Storybook using the canvas, except it's just the opposite type of linking. So we are going to have, if I go into Chromatic, and this should live update with the updates to Storybook, because technically they do have different URLs, but the app ID stays the same. So Firegram, build 17. Yeah, so this one's happy here. Auth modal. Grab this guy. And sure I am indeed looking at the right thing. So auth modal for login. Actually, no, we want to go over here and do it. Sorry. Auth modal, login. I'm going to take this URL and to go back to Figma and paste it here. And we say link story. So then it comes up and you're seeing the actual story from Storybook linked in to Figma. So now we've got one connection going one way from Storybook to Figma, and then another connection coming back the other way. So we can see Storybook from within Figma, and we can also see Figma now from within Storybook. If I look over here. So that's excellent for developers to say, okay, do I have my styles right? Do I have it much as close to the original design as possible? So from that perspective, we're really closing that loop and closing the gap. As of now, there is no actual magic bullet that will say, okay, if you update something in Storybook, it's automatically going to update the component in Figma. That part is still going to have to be done manually by the developer and the designer in tandem to make sure that they're both on the same page. But this way we have tools to verify that A, you are both on the same page, and B, if you aren't, then you will know exactly what differences you're looking at and see, if this is something that, designer says, developer, can you alter this to make it look more like the design? Or developer might come back to the designer and say, look, this is, I know you designed it this way, but it's not really as functional once you get it live as you think it is. Can we change this a little bit? So from that perspective, you've got all the infrastructure in place for DesignOps interplay between Figma and Storybook using Chromatic. So that's pretty much it. That's gone through kind of the entire developer workflow there. And this is pretty much, this is basically what you would be looking at overall in terms of kind of mocking out the ecosystem. So your locally hosted, your developer here who has their locally hosted apps, they can actually publish Storybook to Chromatic if they commit their work, because Chromatic will go and look for the most recent commit on the branch, and it will build based on that. Or they can go and open a PR and then have the CI/CD pipeline publish a Storybook for them. At that point, they can also have someone else who's about to review their PR also review the UI changes and approve or deny. And then from Chromatic, we're going straight over to having a link to Figma components showing up in Storybook. And also on the design side, we have mockups of those React components, and we can have those show up, that Storybook story show up in Figma to the designer. Have a link there for it. So yeah, that's it. That's pretty much how it goes. And if they ever find a way to actually have you update something in Storybook and have that change ripple back to Figma, or vice versa, go Figma to a Figma component to a connected Storybook component and have that change, that would be awesome. But I think there are still a fair bit of considerations where you still need the human eye and the human touch to work out. So, but that is there, and it's, as I said, it worked for me for catching a regression in CSS that I didn't even realize I made. So that's everything.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sarah. Really thorough demo, and I'm sure a useful tool for a lot of folks here. I'm going to open up the floor to questions. I'm sure some folks have some burning questions for you.
Yeah, very cool. Did you, I'm assuming you're using like a free plan of Chromatic. Did you look at the pricing? Is it suitable for startups, or is it a little?
It is. Yeah. Obviously with an app with, I think, 24 components documented in Storybook, it's really not, that's really very much small potatoes. But if we look at Chromatic's pricing, they give you something like 50,000 snapshots, and each story they take a snapshot of when they build with each build. So anytime you have a build, you have snapshots that have been taken. So I look at their billing, I believe their plans start if you're going over something like 50,000 snapshots a month. I'm just pulling this up at the same time. Billing. Yeah. Oh, okay.
35,000 actually, 35,000.
5,000.
So this.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes. So right now for a Sandbox account, it's limited to 5,000 snapshots per billing period, but and this is overkill for somebody like me, but they're like, you have a bonus 75,000 snapshots because this is your first month with Chromatic. Well, first month on this email address. So with that, they're limiting you to 5,000. For perspective, I've used 429 in 18 builds of my Chromatic based hosted storybook. So if you've got a large code base, you would probably be going into billing territory, which when I was with Scope, I looked at it and I believe it starts at about 150 per month. And I'm assuming that's US dollars. So if you're going to have more than that, but if you've got a small to medium size app, if it's a startup, if it's really fairly simple app so far, you're not documenting, because the other thing is you don't have to document all your components in Storybook if they're just presentational or they're just the building materials. I've chosen to document the ones that are actually doing something, they're functional. So things like the login and whatnot, but I also have the login form and other things that I'm not documenting in Storybook quite the same way. I'm going kind of for where we've got functional components versus just the building blocks, the raw materials. So there are some ways to cut down on that. But if you've got a fairly simple, straightforward app with a few screens, a massive code base, and a lot of developers, you'll probably go through your 5,000 snapshots per billing period fairly quickly, and you'll want to go up to that first tier of their paid plan.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for sharing. That's great.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Well, thanks so much, Sarah. I'm going to put a pause on questions and encourage folks to ask Sarah questions directly after all hands today, just in the interest of time so we can get to our next demo. But thanks so much again, Sarah. Really appreciate you putting the time and the thought into this. Again, very thorough and clear demo. So appreciate it.
Thank you.